My guest today is the head of research and development for the brand Lakme, which means she's in charge of products that are being tested in the lab to see if it really does make your skin softer, or if it actually is good for you, or whether or not it's safe to use. It's a fascinating conversation because we're discussing how we know if sunscreen actually works, whether an active ingredient is really active, what they do inside of labs before a product hits the shelf. I've asked a bunch of questions I've always wanted to know about the products we use every day. I hope you find them very useful. So, this is a collaborative conversation between my team and Lakme to figure out how we can understand the products that we use to know if they really are safe, if they really are useful, and whether or not we should use them. So Sapna, you head R&D for Lakme, which means that you are the person in the lab looking at the molecules all day.
Yeah, so I'm actually privileged to head Lakme R&D, and I'm sure many people in India would want to do it because this is the first OG cosmetic brand of India, right? Uh, but yes, I look into the molecules, but I also look into the program and the people. So yeah.
So tell me what lab testing for a skincare product would mean. So what happens in the lab? So because we pick up the product at the end, and Lakme has makeup, it has skincare. So are you responsible for development from formula onwards up till shelf? What journey? Explain that journey to me.
So the way it happens is that you start with an insight first. That what is the consumer hook?
Okay.
And once you understand the consumer pain point or the need gap, then you start to work on a technology. And the technology could be a solution coming through a formulation, or it could be a solution coming through packaging solutions. And then you start to put all of this together in the lab, which is like, you have all the chemicals, raw materials which you put together. You look at the packaging solutions, and then you also do scale up, because everything you can't do it in lab. You go to the factory. You also test it with consumer and validate it clinically. Suppose you're making a benefit to skin or a hair or a lip.
Yeah.
You test it whether it is working or not. So you work with dermatologist, and you work with a lot of clinician to develop the end product. Once the end-to-end testing is done, then only you go to the market.
Tell me something now that you brought it up. What is the difference between dermatology or dermatologist certified and clinically proven? Because we have products that tell us this all the time, saying this cream has been certified by dermatologists. What does that mean? What test have you done? What is that? What does dermatology mean?
So there are I wouldn't call it that two different things, but the way it happens is dermatologist certified could also be that a dermatologist is involved in the product development and has certified the formula. But clinical testing uh, uh, is very clearly testing a product for a benefit on people's skin, hair. So if you do a clinical testing with a dermatologist, usually a dermatologist is involved, then they also could certify this because they have tested and validated it, right?
So basically, if I have a cream that says this will actually make your skin softer, certified means there is a dermatologist who has worked with you to say, yes, yes, this skin is softer. But clinically proven means you've actually got data and testing done to measure how much softer, if at all. And this is actually, in fact, the result. So clinically tested or clinically proven means that there is actual scientific testing in the background.
Clinical testing itself means that you have tested it on the real skin or real hair, right? And it's not only the testing phase, because it all starts with, have you put in something in your product to give you softness, right?
Yes.
So it starts from the molecule. Do you have a benefit molecule in your formula designed? Then only you will be able to test it. So what you put in is what you get. So testing and validation has a lot of importance, but it starts from
what you're putting in. So from what you're putting in, then what is the difference, say, from a natural ingredient or an active ingredient? Now we have, now we read a lot of active ingredients. So what is an active ingredient? What does it do?
I would say that we have in my view, an active ingredient is an ingredient which does some action.
Okay.
Yeah. And if you look at it in cosmetics, we have started to call many things like vitamin C, B3, etc., etc. But even the entire formulation could also be active because it's delivering some action to your skin or your hair, right? So I think we should just look at the full formulation to deliver the benefit and not just the active ingredient.
You
Because it's
telling
not-
me? Are you telling me the terminology active ingredient is just marketing and advertising driven? It actually doesn't mean anything because these things have always been
No,
in our
they
skincare.
are efficacious.
Okay.
They work, but in cosmetic, the entire product works. It's not just the active ingredient. So active ingredient comes from the function of more like a drug, where what happens is the rest of the elements in your product is, by the way, there as fillers.
But they're meant to carry and deliver this one ingredient.
Yeah, but not in cosmetic. Cosmetic, what happens is the entire base also works, and then the active ingredient also works. Yeah, it is definitely not a story. Indeed, there are a lot of good products which have very good active ingredients, and we do study their benefit. So of course we study their benefits.
There's a difference between testing for safety and testing for efficacy.
Yes.
Can you tell me the difference? Explain to us what that difference is.
So, testing for safety is actually starts at a raw material level. So, you start by saying that if I am adding, say, 10 ingredients to make one product, those 10 ingredients, are they toxicologically safe? Are they, do they cover all the, so the way we test is, we look at toxicological, we look at environmental, we look at occupational. So the safety of each ingredient is studied from the value chain point of view. That who's going to use it, who's going to throw it back in the environment, and who's going to make it. So all the people should be safe. Yeah. When you put all of this together and make a product, then you do various kind of testing like patch test. Is the product safe? Will there be irritation, etc., etc.? But if your first level is passed, necessarily you will be passing the test. Yeah?
And you said putting it back in the environment, which I find very interesting because when we wash our face, it runs into the water, eventually finds its way into groundwater sources and drains and things like that. So we need to make sure that not only is it not toxic for the person who's using it, but also for the environment eventually.
And the person who's making it, because it's very important, there is a person who's making those products. So dispensing the materials, all the three people should be.
I remember this story that basically these microbeads that were going into exfoliators were made of very tiny particles of plastic, and because they were so small, they were basically going through all the filtration systems and winding up in the ocean.
And that's the reason nowadays people don't use microplastic, right? Because we know that the product that we wash off should also be degrading in the environment and it should not be left behind. So all of that comes under the safety bit. It's starting from the toxicology, which is the human safety. But efficacy is very different. Efficacy is that when I am saying I'm giving you a benefit, if I'm saying I'm giving you hydration, then I have to measure, first I have to add a hydrating ingredient, and then I have to measure that through my formula, it is actually getting delivered. Because at the end, I have to deliver it onto the skin, and the skin has to feel hydrated. And that can be either measured or felt. Better is to measure it, right? You can measure it without any doubt through various instrument, and that's what clinical studies are essentially. So you measure whether what you have added works or not.
I mean, there was a big problem of a lot of toxicology studies happening on animals. We understand now that most brands don't use animals anymore. What is the replacement? So what are they using instead? How has that change actually been actioned?
Lakme is a PETA certified brand, so we do not do any animal testing. And what do you use is a lot of modeling, lot of in silico testing, lot of testing that you do at a molecule level, which is more in a in vitro setup. So at an in vitro setup with lot of modeling, you can actually predict whether a particular material will be safe or not. So that's what we do, but no animal.
No animals at all. What is in? I mean, So from my research, there's in vivo, there's in vitro, which you just mentioned, there's ex vivo. These are all different types of testing that you do. Could you tell us what this means?
So, very simply, in vitro, which means it is uh, in a petri dish. Yeah. In vivo, which means it is on a skin or a hair or substrate. Ex vivo is when you take a cell or a cell line from human or any animal and then culture it outside. That is ex vivo. So that's how you kind of define them. And all of them have their own importance because you just can't jump into testing on real people till you have passed all of these testing, right? Because you have to have some confidence that they are safe, they will work, etc., and then you go to the higher order testing.
Can lab conditions fully, like you did say when we talk about ex vivo, for example, can lab conditions now in these days fully mimic human skin plus environment? Are you able to achieve those conditions in the lab?
Not to 100% level, but yes, these are screening methods. So, you kind of screen through them to go to the final testing. You would have heard in COVID, there was a lot of testing done before they jumped into doing a clinical studies
Yes.
because you're exposing a sizable population of human before that, right? So it's very important that you screen through and then test it, but it's equally important to test it on the final real people.
Have you ever had a product fail testing?
Many. If you don't fail, how would you learn?
What are the most common sort of causes for a product to fail? So, at what stage have products failed, and what does it feel like inside the lab after you've worked for months on something to say, okay, we have to abandon this project now and start from the beginning again?
There are many, but I think the maximum failure happens at a lab level. I can tell you to get to one product, my team actually works on more than 100 prototypes to get to one product. And Faye, you should come to the lab and see how many batches they would have made with permutation combinations, etc., stability testing and doing a lot of testing to come to one product. And that one product then undergoes multiple testing with consumers, with panel testing, before it even goes to scale up. Because scale up, we are talking of 2 tons and 5-ton product, which is a huge money. And then we do clinical testing after that, which is again sizable amount of money. So there are a lot of products that fail at this stage, which is the beginning. Then there are products which fail at scale up many a time because we are moving from 100 kgs in our lab
Right.
to 2 tons. It's huge. And we also get failures in clinicals. It's and that's how I think we learn because failures tells us what not to do.
So, is there, in your experience, I'm not saying that you do it, but do brands tend to cherry pick lab results and say, okay, we want to be able to say softer, so we will leave out all of these other non-favorable things and only pick the answer that I want? Is that possible?
Not in Unilever.
And given that you worked here for 27 years, you don't have.
I think ethics is very
Yeah,
important, Faye. And I think, and you can't fool the consumer because, I can cherry pick up a result and show it to you. But eventually, you will use my product again and again only when you feel it. I'm
Yeah.
going to say whatever.
Yeah.
And trust me, Indian consumers are even more smarter because the value for money is so much that if I don't get the benefit, I'm going to buy it again. Yeah. So
So the market will punish a bad
will
product.
punish. The products which have lived the life for many, many years, people go back because they find the benefit.
Tell me a story of a product that you worked on that you're very proud of when you see it on the shelf, in a supermarket.
So, to be very honest, everything that I see currently that I'm working on, I feel very, very proud of.
Okay.
But I think that when I look at something like sunscreen, I feel a purpose in it.
Okay, why is that?
Because I feel that it's more than just beautification. Of course, it is cosmetic, But it is somewhere adding back to what Indian skin needs, which is protection from sun. Because we've been always thinking that we have melanin and that's our blessing, and that is indeed our natural advantage. Nobody denies that, and I think we feel all very proud of the color we have. But that's not our sunscreens. We need protection. Our skin needs protection.
Indian skin needs sunscreen.
Yes, indeed. Indeed. And more so. I'll tell you why. Because there are some things which you can see, right? You can see a burn. So if you look at Caucasians or Australians, they can see a burn.
Yeah,
They
they
can see a
turn
sunburn.
red and orange
Yeah,
really
they
quickly.
can immediately see the sunburn on their faces or their exposed areas. We don't. However, what's happening through the UVA rays, deeper on our skin, is eventually turning out to be a pigmentation. So imagine a daily deposit that you are carrying for the damage of your skin. It's almost like daily something is getting added to you. And just a simple sunscreen which you can apply like every day. And I just feel that that habit, if it becomes, it's best for us.
Yeah. Actually, the challenge with sunscreen in India, first of all, is that it seemed like a white person's problem, right? It didn't seem like a problem because we've just grown up in the sun. Plus, the whole idea of the fact that it's so humid and so sticky and sweaty in India anyway, the thought of putting one more layer of, and sunscreen tends to be a little bit on the sticky side. So I know a lot of people refrain from using it, saying that, oh my God, it's going to just become even more sticky, sort of clog up my skin. Is there a solution to that? So before we get to that, let me ask you this. In your opinion, you believe that every Indian should be wearing sunscreen every day? Yes?
Yeah, in my opinion, yes. Irrespective whether you're inside, outside, or I think after your bath, you should definitely use one. And you touched upon actually very important point before you jumped into the question, is that we thought it's a white skin problem. And why? Because they studied a lot of sunscreen benefit for their skin, right? There is not so much of studies that has happened on Indian skin. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's where, when I said there are, for 25 years, there is set of, team based out of Mumbai and Bangalore just working on sunscreen in Indian hot, humid, and UV intense situation. And that's the data pool that we have to tell that it's very important for Indians as well. Because if you look at it, we are very high UV index country. Yeah, our UV index is 8 to 12. And as per WHO, it should be beyond 3. You have to protect yourself. It is the carcinogen one, which is as bad as smoking. So we live in a very high humid condition, high UV index country. We have melanin, which is a blessing, but we also suffer from pigmentation and many photo sun damage, which we call it photo damage. All of that happens to our skin. Why? Because we don't see it immediately.
Yeah.
It happens over a period of time. So it's essential for us, but the two problems: nobody has studied so much, so people are spending time, and there are very few people like us who are really studying it. And second, nobody has taught us because we don't see it immediately. So if you don't see it, you don't like it.
So let me rephrase my question then. Let's assume someone who lives in any of our big cities with Indian skin doesn't wear sunscreen every day. What are their risks? I mean, obviously aging and pigmentation, but are they bigger risks also involved?
So pigmentation is the first risk that triggers the pigmentation. So our skin will be indeed it is much more pigmented, uneven, dull. It also breaks down your collagen and elastin, so your skin start to feel a little more broken down, like your barrier is not that good. And eventually what happens is that the photo aging sets in. And that's the reason you will notice that many of us have a aged face at very early life, early age of early age. And that happens just because we are not taking care of it. If we take care, I'm sure, we will not find. And there are many studies, which clearly says that if you use sunscreen, your skin health is much better.
Actually, the other questions I had about sunscreen for you is that we keep reading that you have to reapply
Yeah.
every couple of hours, that you have to reapply the sunscreen. But here's the thing, right? So you put on the sunscreen in the morning, like you said, after your shower, and then you wear your makeup. So now you have makeup on. How do you reapply sunscreen when you're out and about? You're in the office, there's makeup on. You can't take it off and put your sunscreen back on again. So a lot of people don't do it for a second or a third time in the day. You have on the layer that you put on this morning. How do you navigate that issue?
And that's where I think your second question, which I missed, was the climate relevant,
Yes,
right?
the
That's
stickiness,
the stickiness. And when I said that we have to understand two things, of course, the science of sunscreen and understand Indian consumer and Indian climate. If we don't understand that, we can't deliver a product that works for us. So the best thing to do is look at hot, humid condition and then make a product which is lightweight, which is non-oily, which is non-sticky, which doesn't sweat when you apply, and you can reapply because it doesn't give you white cast. So you can do all of that, and you can also have interesting formats. So the sticks, which you can just apply on your makeup, it doesn't even smudges your makeup, and you can get all the benefit of sunscreen. So there are ways to first make your core product like a lotion or a cream very, very lightweight, and then have new formats.
What is in the sunscreen that protects us? How does it protect us? What's in the bottle?
So let's take a step back and look at what causes sun damage. So there is UVB and UVA. UVC doesn't reach us, so let's stick to only UVB and UVA. UVB is very simple. UVB, just to remember easily, equals to sunburn, B and burn. And UVA is photo aging, so A and aging. Now, what happens is UVA damages the surface of your skin and causes burn, whereas UVA goes deeper and causes pigmentation, causes your barrier damage, photo aging, and which happens over a long period of time. Now, what you have to do is when you are giving a product, you have to have something that protects you from these radiation, these UVA and UVB rays. That's the reason you use something called as sun filters. And sun filters are actually classified as the one which will give you UVB protection, UVA protection, and some also have the broad spectrum, which means they can give both A and B protection. So anyone who starts developing a sunscreen first starts by saying, which filter should I use? What kind of SPF and PA protection I have to give? And which product format I have to start from. So that's how you start to marry the two. But the important element is the UV filters that you choose.
So I had asked you earlier also, how does sunscreen protect us from UVA and UVB? What's in it? What's in the bottle?
In the body, it is sunscreen filters. So they are molecules which are either a physical filter or chemical filters. They either absorb the sunlight or they reflect the sunlight so that it doesn't touch your skin, and it is taken care by the sunscreen. And they usually are photostable molecules, or if they are not, you actually synergize them so that you make them photostable. And what do I mean photostable is when the sunlight falls into it, it doesn't degrade, which means it is almost like, imagine in a very layman's term, almost like your shock absorber. So if you didn't had a sunscreen, your sunlight is hitting your skin directly. When you have a sunscreen, it's either absorbing or reflecting the sun rays.
I mean, now we have to talk about, how sunscreens actually protect us, which is, I understand the SPF factor and how we arrive at that SPF factor. And, I always found it interesting that brands will have these SPF 30, 25, 50, something, something. So why don't you just give me the highest possible? Right? When there is 50 plus available, why give me 25 at all? So I want to be able to break this down and understand what SPF is and how it's tested, and how do we decide as somebody who's buying sunscreen, which is not dermatologist prescribed. So how do I know what I need and what I should buy? Should I just be buying the highest value possible? So what is SPF?
Let's start with first the definition. So it is sun protection factor.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is a number to it. Yeah. And number, if you simply put together, it is how much longer your skin will be protected versus not applying a sunscreen.
Okay.
So if you applied the sunscreen, this is the protection it will give you versus if you didn't apply. But if I break down the number, let's assume, because all of us have melanin, so your melanin will also protect you. So if I expose your skin to, say, sunlight, and in 10 minutes you get a sunburn, and when I apply, say, SPF 30, your sunburn will be delayed by 300 minutes. So 300 divided by 10 is 30 SPF.
Okay.
So what it does is it actually gives you protection or delays the damage. Yeah? That's what SPF number means. And that's the reason for it is very important. If it gets washed off, if you're rubbing, if you're longer hours, you have to apply and reapply because it has to remain on your skin.
So the higher the better SPF for everyone?
SPF 30 blocks about 97% of UVB. SPF 50 blocks about 98% of UVB, and SPF 50 plus, there is only slight difference and there is minimal difference. So your question, I think if we all apply and reapply, SPF 50 is a good one to apply and keep your skin protected. Because beyond that, you get a very little threshold difference.
So effectively also the SPF value tells us how protected we are.
Yes, for how much longer you will be protected.
For how much longer you
will be protected.
And Indian regulation has just changed as to how this can be tested and certified.
Yeah, so on SPF, as an industry body, we've been working for very, very long. Since 2012 onward, we were working. And we were in quest of making this standard with BIS. Why? Because this is very important that we have a testing which is an in vivo testing, tested on humans and real people. So that we know that the product works, and it's not just tested in vitro in a petri dish, in a lab, plates, etc. And finally, this year, BIS has actually published it, which is very good for all of us and for consumers.
In fact, my team went to the lab in Ahmedabad that Lakme uses, and they shot this visual, and we'll just play it out. Could you explain to us what we're looking at?
So this is how the testing is done. Like, it's a very precise testing. So you kind of mark on the back, and a very standard dose of product is then applied. And one side is always kept as not applied product, because that's where you're measuring the delta differences. And then the subject is subjected to solar lamp, which is mid-noon strength of the sun that you have. And then next day, the erythema, which is the sunburn, is measured by a dermatologist, because the only dermatologist knows, how to measure it. You and I can't, except for the 2 points. You and I can't see the difference, but a trained dermatologist
but each box has been damaged by the sun to some degree, and that degree is then measured.
And they've applied the product. So wherever the product is applied, the damage wouldn't be there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that formula is used to certify what SPF is in the bottle of the product.
Yes.
And this is different and better than, say, testing it in a petri dish or testing it with just the formula.
Yeah, because screening method, the PMMA plate, which we call it, which is used for testing it, is good for screening. When I'm screening, say, my 50-60 formula, then I have to use that because, it's cheaper. But when I finally put it in the market, I have to test it on humans, on real people's skin. And the reason is that skin has a lot of porosity, there is spreadability, the weight get absorbed. So all of that will not be completely understood in BMA-8.
So why wouldn't brands always do it this way?
Clinical testing is expensive, and it requires you to spend that much time and money. It also needs time. The testing is it takes a lot of time.
So in order to certify, say, this is SPF 50 in this bottle, I'm doing in vivo testing on actual human skin. How many of these tests that we just saw would you have to do to say, okay, this product has now passed the test?
Sometime multiple, and if I look at our records, we would have done 50 plus tests across all the product development that we have done. And sometimes we also do triangle test, not one test. Sometimes you do 3 tests to figure out that every time you're getting a consistent result. So it's quite a rigorous testing that you do.
What is the difference between a mineral-based sunscreen? Because I read that, mineral-based that has zinc will reflect the light, whereas a chemical-based will absorb it. How do they work?
So it's people have started to call it physical and chemical and mineral and chemical, but it is essentially both are chemical, by the way. Yeah. The only difference is that one is inorganic, and I'm going slightly chemistry, but one
Yes,
is
please.
inorganic and other is organic. That's the only difference because both are chemical.
Mm.
But yes, physical sunscreen do reflect, but some of them also have some kind of scattering and absorption, and the chemical ones actually absorb. But there are a lot of molecular, modifications that are happening. So you can't purely say that, but just simply to remember, yes, physical reflection and chemical absorption.
So tell me this, if I were to make sure that the sunscreen that I was buying is adequately tested, what should I be looking for on the box? What should the box say?
Actually, I always feel first thing you should look definitely for SPF and PA. Don't miss the PA because we Indian require UVA protection much more than UVB because our skin do not undergo sunburn, whereas our skin definitely undergoes pigmentation and deeper damage, etc. So definitely look for SPF and a PA high rating. So that you should. And look for how transparent the brand is. Is the brand declaring what kind of testing they have done? Do they have photo-stable filters? So I think these 3 things you should definitely look, and a texture which you love. Because if you don't like the texture, it'll be like a bitter pill, which you started with saying that it was for white skin, it was sticky, etc. That's all of us has a memory of it, right? So I think look for the texture which you are delighted with and you desire to reapply. So I think that is what I believe.
So a couple of other questions now about using sunscreen. Like we talked about earlier, there was this impression that it was a white person's problem. There are lots of people who say, "Hey, we've never discussed sunscreen, before the last 5 years." Especially now, as I have a young toddler, we are constantly slathering them with sunscreen before we let them out of the house. And my mom would say, we didn't do any of these things for you, and you turned out fine. And we were out in the sun playing all day. Why has sunscreen become a conversation now for Indians?
So, we actually made sunscreen, or we used to use sunscreen as a holiday product. You only packed when you're going for a beach or a mountain or a thing like that. And today it has become an everyday thing. And, the first thing is happening is that we have started to know and understand sun better. So earlier it was that when you go, it was a big dramatic thing, 2 p.m. If you're playing out, please apply sunscreen. But today there are these small, events that is happening in everybody's life, that you're going more out, you're commuting long, you're sitting in glass cabins, and you've started to feel that the heat is hurting your skin. And the one thing which has happened even better is that your consumers are incredibly knowledgeable and they're informed.
Yeah.
They're curious. They're reading up. They are reading up what does sunscreen do, what is SPF, what is broad spectrum, how does it get tested. And that has moved in the beauty industry, the sunscreen conversation little ahead. And the conversation is not no more about should I use sunscreen. The conversation has gone to saying that how is it tested, how much time should I apply, what is the reapplication. You're asking me the same question. So the conversation has gone to a very different level, which is good for all of us. And especially in R&D, it is a wonderful time because we can do better science. We can push ourselves to make our products work
Yeah.
harder and prove it better. But it's all of that, and two things have added. And I don't think I have to prove it to anyone or to you on this, is that our lifestyle has changed. Our environment has changed. Our cities have become more polluted. Our commutes have become longer. There is global warming in everyday life that we are feeling today, which was not the talk of the town before, right? Back in 1990s, nobody ever talked about these problems. And your skin, which is the largest organ, your skin has started to feel more environmental stress. So, sunscreen has not become the talk of the town. I feel the environment around us has changed, which has made a holiday product to come to every day.
Hey, speaking of holidays, is it something we have to use indoors during the winters, during the rainy season when there is no sun out at all?
Yeah.
Or is it purely a summer product?
Again, that's a very big myth, Faye, because this is again proven by science. It's not that I feel it. You don't see the sun in rainy season, but sun is there. The UV light is touching you. It's just that it is passing through the cloud. You are not seeing it. Yeah. And cloud is not absorbing everything. So it is coming to you. Same is in winter. Winter, the heat is less, but the sun is not less. So, and especially in the high UV index countries, sun is never less. We are a high UV index tropical country. We'll always remain hot and humid. It's just the level on the scale changes. So essentially, sun is always there. UV rays are always there. It's just that we have become more aware of them. And you can choose to use maybe SPF 30 indoor, but when you go out, go to SPF 50, that choice you can make. And dermatologist also actually
No,
recommend.
but does the sun reach us when we are indoors?
Of course it does,
How?
because your houses are open. There is a lot of sun that is coming in. Your windows are glass. It passes through glass. UVA can easily pass through glass. UVB can still be restricted, but UVA can reach us. And that's the reason, dermatologists actually recommend saying that you should use SPF 30 even if you're indoor.
Now we have, sprays and creams and sticks. There are different methods in which these are being sold. Does the spray work if the texture suits the customer?
So, spray, if it is formulated well, it is tested well, it works. The reason I say is that if you apply it directly onto your skin, if you're applying and it's, going away and the spray is not really all deposited on your skin, then you're letting it go outside, right? That's the only time when I would say that stay away from spray. However, spray is well formulated, well tested, no problem. It can work. And it can work also for reapplication because it's so easy.
Sunscreen becoming more and more of a premium luxury product because of the expense? Or do you see it eventually being available to all Indians?
So there's lots of testing which is happening on sunscreen. So the amount of testing and the money that goes behind developing is really, really rigorous and high amount, and which is good for consumer because it gives you the right efficacy, right safety. But sunscreen should not be premium. Like I said, that the one product you definitely want to give it to consumer is it should not be premium. It should not be out of reach for sure. And that is the responsibility of the industry. We are responsible for making it accessible. But in order to make it accessible, we have to be 100% sure that the science and the data back behind is not getting lost. So I think that's important.
Basically, if we are going to buy sunscreen, which everybody in your opinion should buy and use, make sure that you're getting the highest possible SPF and you're getting something that is in vivo tested.
Yes.
And in order to make sure that you're actually getting the SPF that is being promised. All right, Sabra, thank you so much for answering all of my questions today. It's been a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you. Thank you.